to Health Literacy Out Loud. I'm Helen Osborne, President of Health Literacy Consulting, founder of Health Literacy Month, and author of the book, Health Literacy from A to Z. I also produce and host this podcast series, Health Literacy Out Loud. Today, I'm talking with Ted Hartwell, who is Executive Director of the Nevada Council on Problem Gambling. Its mission is to create awareness, promote education, and advocate for quality treatment of problem gambling in the state of Nevada. Ted shared that he is in long-term recovery from his own gambling disorder. He now has been advocating on this issue for over 15 years. Ted lives with his family in Las Vegas, where he also is a professional cellist with the Las Vegas Philharmonic. Ted and I first met at a conference for healthcare journalists. I thought that his story about problem gambling and other addictive disorders was an important one to share. Ted, welcome to Health Literacy Out Loud.
Thank you so much for having me, Helen.
Oh, it was just a treat meeting you at that great conference. Let's take it from the beginning. I had never done a podcast. I never really had heard the term, a gambling disorder. Do tell, what's that all about?
So most people are probably more familiar with the term gambling addiction or compulsive gambling, but basically, as the name suggests, it's the uncontrollable urge to keep gambling despite many negative consequences that may be occurring in your life as a result. Just like we think of a substance use disorder as the uncontrolled use of a substance despite negative consequences.
That's interesting to go with disorder versus addiction. But let's talk about the gambling part. And I think what really piqued my interest, aside from just great fun meeting you, was all the ads I see on TV. I see everywhere. Gamble here. I think gambling's been legalized. I'm in Massachusetts. It didn't used to be a big deal here. We had the lottery, but I thought it was out kind of near you that gambling was happening. Now it's happening everywhere. Why now? What's going on?
That's right. We're kind of in the midst of the largest expansion of legalized gambling in this country's history. And that started about 6 years ago with the Supreme Court overturning what was known as the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act, or PASPA. And at that time, basically, they had said that sports gambling was going to be illegal just about everywhere, essentially, except for Nevada, where it was grandfathered in. And the Supreme Court in that decision 6 years ago said it's unconstitutional for us to say that Nevada can do this thing without allowing other states the opportunity to say, hey, we would like to legalize it as well. And in that short 6 years, 38 states and the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico have all legalized sports betting. So those ads that you refer to are largely a result of that decision. And so now you can't turn on a college or professional sports game of any kind without seeing lots of commercials, both preceding and during the game, and even announcers talking about some of the betting odds in some cases.
Is that where people are gambling? Is it on sports? Is it what's legal or legal where you were, now legal everywhere? Or is it all kinds of gambling?
Well, it can be all kinds of gambling. There are 7 or 8 states that have legalized what's called iGaming. So these are more traditional casino-style games, but that are now accessible to you basically through your phone, things like blackjack or roulette or slots. Sports betting, similarly, in most states that have legalized it, they have legalized it through the use of an app so that now you can be gambling technically from your home or your workplace or school even, engaged in one of these apps. There are some states that still require you to physically be present at the casino, for example, but more and more we're seeing this switch to remote types of gambling, and that has a lot of people concerned because that is a risk factor, that isolation, that disconnection from other people for developing a gambling disorder.
I guess I'm going to show my age. I'm originally from New York. I remember there was off-track betting in New York, and that was a big deal. We're far away from that at this point with these apps, right?
That's absolutely right. And another thing that is big difference from traditional sports betting is that it's become very popular to have what are called proposition wagers or in-game betting. You used to basically put down bets on the outcomes of games primarily. So you would bet which team's going to win, are they going to beat the point spread, things like that. But now it's possible in most cases to stay constantly engaged within a game and bet, for example, who's the next player on the baseball team that will hit a home run? How many home runs will there be in the game? How many balls and strikes will a given pitcher throw during a game? So it's literally nonstop. It's essentially the same as sitting in front of a slot machine where you're constantly engaged, can constantly track your bets.
And it's also infiltrating sports. I think I'm hearing about some very accomplished athletes who are losing their job here because are they fixing or rigging games? Are they betting or have friends who are betting, you think?
There's all sorts of different permutations of that. We have coaches who have shared inside information with others who've been betting. Similarly, players doing the same thing. We've had cases of an NBA basketball player recently who basically took himself out of the game early, saying that he was ill. And there were quite a few bets that had come in on that game for him to underperform, I think, on rebounds. And so he was apparently in on that. And he received a lifetime ban for that. And we similarly saw a lifetime ban for a baseball player recently. So it is kind of an insidious thing, and especially for players and young athletes who may be in a situation where they're trying to either make some extra money or help out friends or something like that. There may be a myriad number of reasons, but they get into some serious trouble by betting on games that they're not supposed to. For example, on their own sport, that's a big no matter what, because you are someone who has insider information potentially on those games and has the ability to affect the outcome.
Okay, Ted, you talked about young players. One of my questions is, who's getting involved with this? Is it people of a certain ilk, of a certain age? Young people too? Older people? I mean,
that's a great question. I think with the advent of the legalization of sports betting and also the advertising that you mentioned that has come along with that, we see more and more young people getting involved. There are multiple studies that show that, especially in the college environment, most both female and male students who are living on campus are actually betting on sports. And 70% of them are either not of age to be doing it legally, or they live in jurisdictions where gambling has not yet been legalized. About a third of them will admit to using a student bookie to place bets. And this is all very concerning, not only from the legality standpoint, but as we go backwards even further into high school, we see quite a bit of engagement, especially with the male athletes, in either betting with their friends or finding ways to circumnavigate the age protections in some cases on the apps, or simply using offshore apps that are technically illegal to even be using, but which anyone just about could set up an account and be gambling on.
So I'm certainly getting the message from you. It's pervasive. It's affecting people of all ilks across the U.S. and probably around the world. What's the hook for it? What you talked about, people might make some money if they get it, but what are people trying to get out of it? Is it the thrill of betting on something, or is it beyond that, the enticement?
Yes, I should say right off the bat that for most people, of course, gambling will never become a problem. Most people who choose to gamble can do so for fun and entertainment, just like most people who choose to occasionally drink alcohol won't develop an alcohol use disorder. But for that small percentage that do, it can become absolutely devastating. And one of the major risk factors is gambling in youth or gambling at a young age, even though the problem may not manifest until much later on in adulthood. It's setting up some of those neural pathways to be more susceptible to developing a gambling addiction. And the interesting thing about a gambling disorder is that although you're not ingesting a substance with gambling, it is what we call a behavioral addiction. The biochemistry in the brain looks just about identical to a substance use disorder. So you see the same types of dysfunction around neurotransmitters like dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin that we see with the substance use disorder, and also the distorted thinking patterns with the gambling disorder that we often see with substance use disorder. And these things frequently co-occur as well as, or people often switch from one addictive disorder to another in their recovery from the other.
I'm glad you made that connection with the brain and what's going on chemically and all that. This podcast is Health Literacy Out Loud. All the listeners are somehow interested in communicating about health, whether they're in a clinical setting or a public health setting or in the community or just around people who care. Tell us more about the medical, the health, the public health connections with this gambling disorder.
Absolutely. Well, let me start with that last part first, the public health aspects. All of us probably have this preconception or this stereotype of what somebody with a gambling addiction looks like, or maybe the behavior they're engaged in and the impact that they're having. And people tend to think of somebody who looks very much down on their luck, maybe who is homeless or something like that, engaging in certain behaviors. But really, there is no face for a gambling addiction, just like there really isn't a face of a substance addiction or substance use disorder. But the havoc that those of us who develop a gambling disorder can wreak on those of us around us can be substantial. So it's in my case, for example, I was someone who was not only destroying myself financially, I was also impacting my family in the same way. I was impacting multiple job sites in terms of my productivity with those organizations, because I was often gambling at times I was supposed to be working, because that was the easiest way to hide the fact I was gambling from my wife and my family. And above and beyond that, I was part of that subset of individuals who had the potential to jeopardize this country's national security because of my role in those organizations. So when we talk about the public health aspect, problem gambling is something that definitely affects much more than the individual.
Well, I just want to ask you a little bit more, and thank you for sharing about your story. How are you doing now?
I'm doing very well. I haven't made a bet since September 14th, 2007 on anything, so I'm pretty proud of that.
I'm proud of it too. Yay, you. So I was just thinking, you talked about all the social, financial mess that you apparently got into. That sounds like it affected work and family and, everything else, finances in there. What are some of the other consequences? You compared it to drinking or maybe to smoking. Those are things people keep doing. If someone's a real problem drinker, you probably can see it on them after a while, or a smoker, they'll be symptomatic. Are there symptoms we could notice about gambling, people who have this disorder?
Yes, you're very right to bring that up. There is a reason we call this the hidden addiction, because it can be much more hidden than most other types of addictions we think of. You can't smell gambling on my breath. You might be able to smell it on my clothes. If I'm gambling at a casino that allows smoking and I'm a non-smoker, that could be a sign. For example, if you're concerned about someone and they're reeking of cigarette smoke and they don't smoke, that they've been in a casino. But the ways that, I can affect myself, those of us with a gambling disorder tend to engage in more medical self-neglect. So we can exhibit symptoms that may be a result of self-neglect. We certainly tend to engage in more general lying and hiding behavior. If there are unexplained absences or lies that seem about where I happen to be, that could be a sign or symptom. A general obsession with gambling, even when I'm not in the act of gambling, that could be another thing to look for, either in yourself or someone that you care about, or a coworker. But by and large, this is something that can be hidden for years sometimes, especially if the person with the disorder is the one who is in control of the finances, either in the family or at the business.
Okay. All right.
I wanted to get back to your question about people in the medical field, though, because I didn't answer that. If you are someone who works in a clinic, whether it's in the area of behavioral mental health or just in a medical clinic of some kind, and as part of your intake process or that annual checkup, you have somebody asking questions about alcohol consumption, cigarette use, drugs,
Exercise,
either
yeah.
illicit, yes. Do you feel safe in the home? Please, please, please consider adding a question or two about gambling behavior. There are some specific questions that have been developed by the Cambridge Health Alliance that show very good agreement with the need for more in-depth screening, and I can mention those.
Yeah, please tell us what those are.
This is asking the individual to consider the past 12 months, each of these three questions. The first is, have you become restless, irritable, or anxious when trying to stop or cut down your gambling? The second is, have you tried to keep your family or friends from knowing how much you gambled? And then the third is, did you have such financial trouble as a result of your gambling that you had to get help with living expenses from family, friends, or welfare? And an answer of yes to any one of those questions or more is an indication that person should be referred for more in-depth screening by someone who is certified to do that screening. So having those resources on hand for your particular state, reaching out to your affiliate council. We have 36 states that do have an affiliate council like we have in Nevada. And just knowing where to send that person can be very important.
Thank you so much. Those questions are extremely helpful there. And my follow-up was going to be, okay, so someone answers yes to one or two or three of those questions. Then what? Where do the referrals go to? So you have something set up in Nevada.
Yes, and most states will have an affiliate council where they can provide you can reach out to them. Most of them will provide, brochures or information free of charge. But the most important resource that everyone should know about is the National Problem Gambling Helpline, which is very easy to remember. It's 1-800-GAMBLER.
1-800-GAMBLER. And we'll have that on your Health Literacy Out Loud webpage too.
Excellent. And that works in all 50 states and U.S. territories. It's 24/7. It's completely confidential. And that will connect you to resources in your area so that they can tell you, where is the next 12-step meeting, for example? What are the professional...
12-step.
Yes.
Equivalent to drinking. Okay.
Gamblers Anonymous. We have over 100 meetings a week here in Las Vegas of Gamblers Anonymous.
Goodness. Okay.
Yes.
So our listeners also might be working at community organizations. And all of us are, have friends and loved ones and all of that. What can people without that professional hat in medicine or public health be doing about this now?
Simply beyond screening, you can reach out again to your state council and develop a partnership with them. They often provide staff briefings, kind of 1-hour lunch and learns, for example, that they can come and provide either in person or remotely to your staff to help build up competency in recognizing or asking questions about this and knowing where to refer people. You can invite those local councils and also Gamblers Anonymous does have a public information arm. You can invite those organizations to table at your health events, right? If you have a community health events, we do lots and lots of community events, veterans stand down, another at-risk population, senior centers at county health fairs. So we always have tables with information at all those events. So those are a couple ways in which everyone can become involved, and it requires very little work on your part, just mostly reaching out and saying, hi, here I am. I'd like more information.
So let's kind of look at this in historic perspective and a personal one. 15 years ago, it sounds like, Ted, you were at a very low spot when it came to gambling.
Almost 17. 15, I was in a pretty good spot. But yeah, if you go back 17, it was pretty 17. Desperate.
Look at you now. You're like the executive director of the Nevada Council on Problem Gambling. You've come a long way in there. That's your story. Where do you see other people's stories going, or where do you see this issue of problem gambling disorders going in the short term and in the much longer term?
So I think in the short term, we need to build up more general awareness of this as an addictive disorder, as something that is very real. People who are in the midst of a gambling disorder often feel uniquely alone in the way that people with a substance use disorder probably do not today, because we have focused so much attention on things like the opiate epidemic and other things like that. With gambling, we do not have those public advocates yet. For example, celebrities and elite athletes that we see in the substance realm, even past presidents of this country, right, that will allude to their struggles with alcohol, for example, and how they got better. So letting people know this is a real thing, they are not alone in it, and also that there is treatment out there, both self-help as well as professional treatment at every level, and also people who do engage in the treatment, which is the tough part. Getting people through the door, getting people help seeking are often very, very successful. I hold myself up as a very extreme model. I'm kind of towards the far end, but I know many other people who still maintain their own anonymity, that they struggled with this, but have completely turned their lives around for themselves and their family as a result of the resources they've sought out.
Thank you. You are, in ways, right out there. When I met you at this conference, you and I have some relationship to journalism, but the conference was totally amazing. I met you at a first attendee session.
That's right.
And we were just chatting. You're very easy to talk to. I don't think either one of us knew anybody there. And then you gave me your card and you told me right then about gambling disorders, and it affected you too. Your candor about this, you shared it with me. I've since told others about this, and then this podcast can be amplified even more. You are making a difference, Ted, in just spreading the word about it. I hope that our listeners who all care about health communication, health literacy, will take this on too. I hope that it'll strike someplace deep inside and we'll go, we want to work on this too. We want to help someone. Maybe it's me, maybe it's somebody I know or care for or care about. Ted, I wish you so well, and thank you for being a guest on Health Literacy Out Loud.
I really appreciate the opportunity to share the message about this subject. Thank you so much.
As we just heard from Ted Hartwell, it's important to think about gambling disorders and other addictions too, in all the ways we communicate about health. But communicating clearly about this and all the other life issues is not always easy. For help clearly communicating your health message, please take a look at my book, Health Literacy from A to Z. Feel free to also explore my website, healthliteracy.com, or contact me directly at helen@healthliteracy.com. New Health Literacy Out Loud podcast interviews come out the first of every month. Get them all for free by subscribing at healthliteracyoutloud.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Please help spread the word about health literacy out loud. Together, let's tell the whole world why health literacy matters. Until next time, I'm Helen Osborne.